So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the Artificial Intelligence, Big Data and Future of Work webinar this morning. We're very excited to have 4 industry experts joining us today to discuss how these concepts interconnect and the opportunities and challenges that can arise due to these new technologies in the workplace. So my name's Erin and I'm from Go1. I'm here just to make sure our webinar runs smoothly, but I'll get started and give our introductions to our 4 speakers. So first up today, we do have Sriram Bhargav from Wipro, and he specializes in automation and artificial intelligence. He has extensive experience scaling technology-led automation platforms and has helped grow the automation business for Wipro in the Asia Pacific region. Now we also have Rohin Aggarwal, a strategy manager from Seek, and he's going to share his insights from working at Seek and the impact that automation and AI has had on the employment landscape in Australia. Rohin has quite a diverse background, having worked in startups through to corporates all over the world. Now, our speaker here today talking about big data is Dr. Adnan Bader. He's a senior solution architect at Teradata. His background is in data analytics, information management, and he's helped organizations develop an appreciation for their information assets and identify the right opportunities for growth. And our last speaker today is Dr. Chris Scanlon, and he's from Swinburne University of Technology. Chris has 20 years of experience in higher ed and at the moment is focusing on digital transformation and the student experience as well as product development. Now, I'd like to say if you do have any questions after listening to our speakers today, please pop them in your right sidebar chat and I'm happy to pose them at the end to our speakers. Now, I thought it would be best to get started talking about probably the hottest topic at the moment, which is artificial intelligence. And we've got 2 speakers who are going to answer some questions about that. So we're going to start off with Sriram, who I want to ask you, Sriram, given your portfolio is AI and automation, I'm guessing you're often seeing examples of workforce transition, upskilling. Is that your experience in that space at Wipro and generally?
Yes. Can you hear me, Erin?
I can, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yes. Let's face it. At some point in time, AI will be everywhere. Banks, factories, hospitals, airports, sports, airplanes, shopping centers, you name it, AI will be everywhere, and we have to face it. Given that precedence, the current workforce, whether it's at Wipro or any other large enterprise, they're going through a major reskilling and transformation program. And there is a reason why this upskilling is very urgent and is important. If you look at some of the data points, by 2022, it is predicted at least 40 to 50% of, let's say, new application development projects will have AI co-developers on the team. By 2022, half of large industrial companies will start using what is called as digital twins. And they will expect at least 20 to 40% improvement in their effectiveness for their organizations. By 2022, 70% of large enterprises will be experimenting with immersive technologies for consumer and enterprise use. And 25% of them would have deployed them to production. By 2030, AI and blockchain will create almost 3.1 trillion in business value. By 2022, again, more than 50% of all people collaborating in Industry 4.0 ecosystems will use what is called as virtual assistants or intelligent agents to interact more naturally with their surroundings and with their people. So all of this means that the current workforce needs an absolute reskilling and upskilling. And this also means that the hiring policies of the companies will also change. AI and machine learning skilled resumes probably will have more chances and more opportunities. So in fact, at Wipro, we now have 165,000 employees and 19,000 bots, which is actually equivalent to 19,000 people. But we need more, really more. So what we have done essentially at Wipro, we have our next generation skilled workforce program. under which the employees are being upskilled. And we have partnered with the Swinburne University of Technology for their bite-sized, future-focused learning microunits. I really strongly believe that the balance in these kind of microunits are just perfect and provides the right impetus for one's career. That's what I had to share, Erin.
On that topic, you're talking, there's a lot of stats, and it seems like there's a lot of AI coming into workforces, particularly in the near future. Are there any trends or predictions you have in this space as to what will happen in the implementation of automation in workforces?
Absolutely. While there are quite a few of these technologies back in the lab, they are undergoing what is called as curation. Some of the trending technologies or the trending topics are as follows, right? Number one, digital twins. I spoke about digital twins. It started in factories, which it's a big thing under what is called as Industry 4.0. But digital twins will essentially drive manufacturing, retail, and the utility space in the future. The second trend which we are seeing is autonomous vehicles and cars. While a lot of companies are experimenting on autonomous cars, the real value is in something like mining. A company like Rio Tinto has autonomous driverless vehicles in their mines, which essentially is very mature in operations today. The third one, which I'm seeing, is all around natural language processing, natural language generation, natural language summarization, right? If you look at typical IT industry, most of help desk, service desk, and customer support services will be driven by these kind of technologies, NLP-driven technologies, and it will end up being zero human touch in the future. The fourth one is all around learning. Like learning has come ages, and it is very mature now, be it deep learning or machine learning, and it is becoming one of the biggest powers in the new IT revolution. And this will actually dictate how IT will operate in the next century or so. Robo advisors and fraud detectors are another hot topic in the banking and the insurance industry, and that is trending. Robo advisors have gone beyond and proved its point already in the insurance industry. The next one is what is called as persona-based AI, right? So what is typically driving industries is AI for, let's say, a CFO, AI for a chief marketing officer, AI for a chief information officer, or AI for a chief data officer. So there has now been a persona-based classification on AI as well. So that's how it is maturing so fast. Last but not the least, there is a trending topic on ethics in AI. Now, it's important that AI is ethical and it is used for, and the practices you define around AI is very ethical. So ethics in AI is the next hot topic. Last but not the least, there are other driving forces for AI. There is another prediction that by 2025, humans will talk less to their spouses and robots. Well, that is, I'll leave it to your imagination whether that's good or bad. But yeah, there are quite a few of these trending topics which will drive the next generation of AI into IT and into business in the next 5 years.
Yeah, undoubtedly. There sounds like there's a lot to come. I mean, we could talk about ethics and AI all day as well, but I will leave it at that and I will head to Rohin. Probably coming from quite a different background, you're potentially seeing another side of AI and how that could be impacting Australian workforces. I mean, particularly there's this hype about job destruction due to AI. Do you think it's really just wholesale job losses, or is there a way people can upskill or what they can do to prepare for this?
Yeah, it's interesting, Erin, because there's definitely a lot of hype about it, and I think what's really difficult is picking reality away from the hype. I think as with most things, it's a much more nuanced than the press makes it out to be. So while there'll definitely be some areas that'll see a reduction in roles, there'll be a number of other areas that are going to see an increase. And I think in general, most of the recent reports agree that there'll be a net increase in roles in the long term. So I think at Seek, we'd spend quite a bit of time thinking about this. And one of the things that we're expecting is what we call a hollowing out of the middle. So what I mean by that is if you think about a spectrum where on the left-hand side, you have kind of low-skilled roles. On the right-hand side, you have high-skilled roles. What we're expecting is in general, the low and high-skilled roles will probably increase over time. And I'll kind of talk about why in a second. And the ones in the middle are where we're expecting there to be a little bit more of a decrease in the long run. So the roles on the left, what do I mean by that? They're the ones like carers, hospitality workers. They require a little bit, but not a huge amount of training. And the reason we expect those jobs to be safe and growing over the long run is because they're highly variable and they require a degree of problem solving and physical dexterity that'll be hard to automate away. You look at the roles on the right, they're also equally highly variable. They're the creatives, the developers, the scientists, and the makers of the machines. So that area already has a massive shortage of talent, and I'm sure a lot of our panelists who are hiring roles in this space will probably realize that as well when you're trying to look for talent here. And ironically, we expect the shortages to get much worse in the long term. And then you look at the roles in the middle. These are the process-driven ones. So over the last couple of decades, we've already seen a lot of these get outsourced or automated, and we see this trend continuing. And I think it's important to know that this is a fundamental change, not just to the labor force, but also to society in general, because a reduction in the middle class and kind of middle skilled roles we've seen historically can lead to a reduction in social cohesion. And I think one of the points I wanted to make is, Sriram touched on this, is that there's some sectors kind of longer term, you're expecting changes to a net decrease, and in other sectors, you're expecting a net increase. And so you look at the mining sector or you look at financial services, so sectors that either have a lot of physical and manual tasks, or in the case of financial services, you look at how disrupted they have been by mobile technology. And you can see that they are definitely a sector that over the last several years, and a trend that we expect to continue, is that they'll continue seeing a net reduction. But on the other hand, you look at professional services, and they tend to be a little bit more on the higher skilled end of the spectrum. We expect those to have a net increase in the workforce.
I think that's quite interesting to put it on a sector by sector base. That's quite an interesting way to look at it. I think also an interesting question is, technology has obviously helped us, sectors, organizations, workforces in a whole different way, but there have been some unforeseen biases that have been introduced. Are there ways that you know that are good to counteract those?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you expect machines to kind of be able to overcome some of the biases that humans have. But I think what a lot of people forget is that machines are built and trained by humans. So if biases exist in people, which we know that they do, they can get embedded into machines that they build. I might talk about one of those, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of how you help counteract them. So I think an interesting example when we think about implicit biases is last year, Amazon came out and said that they had shut down an AI recruiting tool that they'd been using for about 4 years because it was found to have a bias against women. Now, they didn't build it to be biased, but the training algorithm that they used patterns that they built up over a 10-year period. And that was a period during which mostly men had applied for software developer and technical roles. So the system started penalizing resumes that had candidates who went to all women colleges, or they promoted resumes that had verbs that were more commonly found on male engineered resumes. And so if I turn to kind of the second half of your question, what do we think we can do about it to try and prevent some of these biases creeping in? I think companies can take 4 steps. So I think the first one is a lot of companies tend to put AI in simply because it's a tool that they think could result in an efficiency saving. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. So you probably need to be a little bit more thoughtful about where it makes sense to introduce a machine versus where that judgment is better coming from a human. I think the second thing is all systems are only as good as the data that you put in. So spend a bit of time to go through the training data, think critically about kind of the period of time during which that training data was developed, and evaluate whether any bias is likely to be present. I think the third step is continually monitor the outcomes. So it's not just a matter of kind of making sure your training data is right and putting it in the system, but most of these machines tend to, particularly the ones that implement machine learning, where the systems are continuing to iterate and learn, you need to make sure that you're continually monitoring the outcomes to make sure that you don't have the bias built in. And I think the Amazon example is a great case where they did monitor it, and once they identified that those biases were there and they hadn't quite figured out how to get rid of that bias yet, they decided it's better to actually shut the system down. And then the final thing I'd say is think about ways you can remove the bias. So one of the examples that we've been implementing in the last year here at Seek is we have a product called Talent Search where recruiters can go in and take a look at kind of candidate resumes and their profiles. And we introduced a feature called Hide Names. And the idea is you can now look at the candidates and look at their capabilities and you look at their experience without getting implicitly biased by the fact that they could be a male or a female or from a particular ethnicity. And we've started seeing some great uptake in it, but it's those sort of things that companies can be conscious about, that how do you implement it in a way that removes some of those hidden biases.
Yeah, no, they're very good, quite useful steps for our listeners today. I quite like that. And it was a good segue when you started talking about data for me to pass over to Adnan. So from your point of view on this topic of data management, a lot of what is described and has even been discussed today when we talk about AI, particularly in workplaces, is really just businesses leveraging vast quantities of data and better processing those. Is that how you are seeing this space transform?
Yeah, that's all very relevant suddenly, right? So Sriram has talked about what the future looks like with AI. So I'll probably take a different angle on that and talk more about what is enabling that AI and hence how the future gets defined through that enablement. So AI, when it started, say in the middle of last century, the idea was for machines to be able to process data, interpret that data, and make decisions on that data like humans do. So the whole idea was about mimicking human behavior in terms of making intelligent decisions. Now at that time, the idea of AI and the practical implementations were quite limited. And that's because of the technological issues that existed at that time in terms of capturing, processing, and crunching data and storing data per se as well. We as humans have been collecting data, processing data, making decisions on data since the beginning of time. And now that we expect the machines to do the same, we need to be able to enable machines to capture, store, and process data the same way we do. So the way I see AI working, it's got two key ingredients. It requires a way of processing that data just like we do. So there's intelligence and algorithms and processing methodologies. But the magic sauce really is the data that you feed into those algorithms and into those machines. So the more data you feed those machines, the better they will get at interpreting it and processing it, and then start making decisions on those things. So what we saw at the start of this century was a very rapid change in technology, particularly this data storage technology. So we got a lot better at not just capturing data, but we got a lot better in terms of technology for storing and processing and also transferring data from one place to the other. So with the start of the internet in the mid-90s, we started seeing the transfer of data becoming so easy. With the mobile technology, we could start to connect various devices that can start transferring data from one point to the other. But even look at how cheap it has become and how compact it has become to store data, where back in the 90s, megabytes and terabytes were unimaginable. Now we talk about terabytes in little memory sticks sitting in our pockets. So massive amounts of data can be captured and stored very easily and very cheaply. So we've solved that problem of providing that magic sauce to the AI, and that's why AI has suddenly become popular again, and this time it's gonna stay. As Sriram said, it's only gonna get more pervasive. It's gonna be everywhere and anywhere that we see it. Whether it allows you to talk to your partners and spouses, I'm not sure if it's gonna quite get there. But think of it that way, maybe. If you can capture enough voice patterns from your partners in terms of data and feed that into the machine, and then build a machine learning model around it, which requires the same exercise as training students. So build a model, train the model, teach the model in terms of the reactions of your partners based on how you reacted to their voice tones. You might get to a point where the machines will talk to your partners and you will talk to the machines. That's definitely achievable. But in terms of practical applications of AI using large, massive amounts of data, the other aspect of it is the capturing side, right? So we can digitize data faster and better than ever. We can store libraries upon libraries of data into small devices and digitize it and feed it into bots and machine learning algorithms. So data has really become the new capital. Every single organization is now thinking of using data as their key capital rather than any other assets. So those other assets have become less important to any organization in any industry, and it's getting more pervasive as well. So the issue that that presents to the organizations and the professionals of today is, while we've become very data rich, are we really data driven? Are we actually using data to drive our businesses and drive our decision making? And the challenges that presents is around the quality of data, around how you best manage it, around what data do you actually use and what data is not valuable to your business, and making those value-based decisions around data, that's becoming the key driver for any business. So whether it's in healthcare sector and you're digitizing and storing scans of people and getting the machines to compare those scans to identify patterns and anomalies, to inform the right treatment decisions by practitioners. It depends on the quality of the scans and how good the comparison algorithms would be, right? Or if you look at predictive maintenance of machinery in the mining industry, or you look at driverless cars, so driverless cars will only be as good as the data that we feed those driverless cars on a continuous basis, because they need to continually learn from the mistakes that the machines make over time. Just like we do as humans, we learn from our mistakes. We need to enable those machines to be able to learn from their mistakes as well. And that will only happen if we can feed the data continuously, vast amounts of data continuously into those machines, and then help guide those machines as well. So the practical applications of AI, of data, of machine learning, they're just limitless. There is no end to it now that we have this magic sauce into the pudding.
Thank you, Aidan. It's quite interesting to hear the practical side and how essentially everything you do drives the AI and the technology growth, and interesting how they interconnect very tightly. I think it would be worth handing over to Chris. What we've heard a lot of insights from 3 different professionals in the industry. I'm wondering how Swinburne is responding to these trends and what we've heard today and what you're seeing.
Thanks, Erin. We're being disrupted just like everybody else, and I think every education provider is. So this is all very familiar. But so that requires us to change, and clearly education does have to change. And we're doing a whole stack of things at Swinburne. Everything from our own journey of digital transformation, as well as packing more work integrated learning, placements, things like that into the curriculum. But the other big one that we're launching soon is something that Sriram alluded to in what he was talking about, micro units. excuse me, all these areas are very fast changing. And, and I'm an academic, and when I think about, a new offering, I think about a full course, a graduate certificate, a master's, and we're finding that's not sort of really suitable for these kinds of changes that we're seeing, because they're so fast changing that, by the time you've completed your master's, it's out of date. So we've launched micro units, and micro units are smaller than a normal unit or subject that you do at a university. We're talking about 5 to 6 weeks worth of learning, all online, 4 to 5 hours of time a week. So that's in terms of the commitment. And we've targeted these areas: cybersecurity strategy for leaders, intelligent automation, big data, Industry 4.0, and the future of work. And these are really kind of, what we see areas where people need to upskill very quickly. And so it's really trying to get both industry insights and academics in the room to develop a curriculum that we can take out to people who are facing these changes or have an interest in these changes, can see these in the future. But for many people, this is the present. It's not off in some far distant future. This is their present. So they need to be able to combat and address those changes. And really the focus, our core question in designing them was, what questions, or what can you do now that you've completed this micro unit, that you couldn't do before? What questions can you ask? And Adnan made a really good point about data, that we're drowning in data in some respects. Are we asking the right questions? And so the micro units are really about asking the right questions of these technologies and these kinds of changes, so that you can start to strategize and plan and develop a better approach to them, so that we can kind of get we can unlock the value and the benefits that these technologies are bringing.
I mean, you touched on it briefly. It seems that it's very important to have the collaboration, the co-design of experts amongst who we're sitting today, as well as academics, to make sure we get that content right, particularly in those micro units. Is that your experience? Are there advantages that you found in this collaborative approach from an industry perspective and from an academic point of view?
Absolutely. I think that's any university that isn't drawing in industry experts and industry insights in the development of curriculum, I think has a limited shelf life. We know, I just read the statistic I just saw, it was put across my desk yesterday, 72% of education providers believe new graduates are ready for work. So that's from the university's point of view. Only 42% of employers share that belief. That's a damning statistic from where I'm sitting. So I think we need to collaborate with industry much more. It is happening. I think it needs to just become what we do, and we need to facilitate the exchange between industry and academics. And we're doing that at Swinburne. We've got the partnership with Wipro, we've got partnership with Seek, we've got Siemens. There's more to come, and a lot of these are based around the research side of things, and that's kind of where the focus is. But we really want to draw that into the teaching, into the design of our curriculum, so that students are getting the insights of industry, and industry are starting to shape what we do, and sort of that's a conversation. I think in the past, universities used to say we're kind of the theoretical knowledge, industry does the applied knowledge. Now, to the extent that was true in the past, I don't think that distinction makes any sense now, that there might be a different emphasis in how we go about things, but the idea that these are separate conversations that should never overlap, I think that's fanciful. And I think the micro units are really there to a really good example of how to bring that conversation together, and as an ongoing conversation, because all of these topics, all these micro units will have to be updated like any other curriculum. So we want that as an active conversation that's ongoing with industry.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I mean, undoubtedly, it seems like there's a theme of interconnection here between our experts and between what universities are doing, which is a nice takeaway, I think, today. I do have a few minutes to wrap us up. We've gone a little bit close to time. I can't see any questions in the sidebar, so I'll leave it at that today. We've heard quite a lot from our speakers. I think speaking on behalf of our listeners as well, I've really enjoyed that. I will just bring up something on the screen because there has been a lot of alluding to these micro units. So if you are wondering how Go1 has a part in this and why we're hosting this webinar today, is Go1 and Swinburne have collaborated to deliver some professional development micro units via the Go1 platform. So if you are interested, you can see a little link at the bottom of this screen, go1.com/Swinburne-Go1. And on that site, you will find the 3 units currently available via Go1. A firm favorite of mine is the Being Bold at Work. It's a course for professional women. So I'd suggest you jump onto that site where you can read about the courses, the duration and the price. Let us know if you want any more information. Again, I do want to thank our speakers for joining us today. It's been very insightful. I hope everyone enjoyed that. We have recorded the session as well, so I will distribute after this webinar with everybody who's online today. And that's it from me. So thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.